Japan's 395-kilometer tsunami defense. A wall against nature's fury on March 11, 2011, at 2:46 p.m. local time. The earth beneath the Pacific Ocean floor ruptured with the force of 23,000 Hiroshima bombs. What followed wasn't just another earthquake, it was nature's declaration of war against one of humanity's most prepared nations. Within minutes, walls of water reaching heights of 40 meters began racing toward Japan's northeastern coast at the speed of a commercial airliner. But this wasn't the first time the ocean had launched such an assault, and Japan had been preparing for this moment for over half a century. The ghosts of tsunamis passed to understand Japan's monumental 395-kilometer tsunami defense system. We must first journey back to the night of June 15, 1896. When the Meiji Sanriku tsunami struck during a festival celebrating Japan's Boys' Day, families were gathered on beaches. Children played in the shallows, and lanterns illuminated coastal villages in celebration. Without warning, waves towering 38 meters high obliterated entire communities, killing over 22,000 people in minutes. Survivors described the sound not of crashing water, but of a freight train carrying the screams of the dying. This catastrophe seared itself into Japan's collective memory. But it was merely the opening chapter of a recurring nightmare. The Showa Sanriku tsunami of 1933 claimed another 3,000 lives. And the Chilean tsunami of 1960 reminded Japan that the Pacific Ocean itself was their enemy, capable of hurling destruction from thousands of miles away. Each disaster taught the same brutal lesson. Japan's greatest vulnerability lay not in the sky or on land, but in the very waters that surrounded their island nation. The birth of a fortress. By the 1960s, Japan faced a stark choice: surrender their coastal communities to the ocean's whims, or wage an engineering war against nature itself. They chose war. What began as a modest coastal protection program evolved into the most ambitious tsunami defense project in human history, a concrete barrier stretching 395 kilometers along Japan, its most vulnerable shores rising up to 15 meters above sea level in some sections. This wasn't merely construction. It was a philosophical revolution. For centuries, Japanese culture had emphasized harmony with nature, accepting natural disasters as part of their destiny. But the post-war generation rejected this fatalism. They would not simply endure, they would fight back with concrete, steel, and human ingenuity. The scale defied comprehension. Stretched in a straight line, Japan's tsunami walls would span the distance from New York to Detroit. The project consumed enough concrete to build a sidewalk from Tokyo to Los Angeles. Entire mountains were quarried to provide materials. And coastal fishing communities found themselves transformed into construction zones that resembled wartime. Fortifications more than peaceful harbors. Engineering the impossible, building tsunami walls presented challenges that pushed engineering to its absolute limits. Unlike traditional seawalls designed to withstand storms, tsunami barriers had to survive impacts equivalent to being struck by liquid freight trains. The water's force wasn't just powerful, it carried deadly cargo of cars, buildings, trees, and debris that turned each wave into a projectile weapon. Engineers developed revolutionary construction techniques, embedding steel reinforcement bars deep enough to anchor entire city blocks. They calculated that a single meter of tsunami wave carries the destructive force of a small bomb, meaning their walls needed to withstand bombardment that would level conventional structures. Some sections were built with foundations extending 30 meters below sea level, deeper than 10-story buildings are tall. But perhaps the most ingenious innovation was the wall's curved design. Rather than standing rigid like ancient castle walls, Japan's tsunami barriers were engineered to deflect water upward and outward, transforming the ocean's fury into harmless spray. This technique, borrowed from centuries of samurai sword-making philosophy, turned force against itself. The human cost was staggering. Construction workers battled typhoons, freezing winters, and dangerous tides for decades. Many sacrificed their lives building humanity's greatest defensive structure. Their bodies quite literally becoming part of the foundation of Japan's security. March 11, 2011. The ultimate test. Here's where our story takes its darkest turn. For all their preparation, for all their concrete and steel, nothing could have prepared Japan for what the Earth unleashed that spring afternoon in 2011. The 9.0 magnitude Tohoku earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Japan, generated tsunami waves that dwarfed even the most pessimistic projections. In some areas, water reached heights of 40 meters, nearly as tall as a 13-story building. The carefully calculated 10-meter walls that had protected communities for decades suddenly seemed as inadequate as sandcastles. At Minimus and Riku, residents watched in horror as the tsunami engulfed their supposedly impregnable 15-meter seawall, as if it were a speed bump. The water didn't just overtop the barriers, it obliterated them, carrying away entire sections of concrete that had taken years to construct. In Riku's Intaka, a city protected by some of Japan's highest tsunami walls, the water swept away nearly every building, leaving a moonscape of mud and debris. Yet even in failure, the walls saved countless lives. In areas where barriers remained intact, they provided precious minutes for evacuation. The city of Fudai, protected by a controversial 15.5-meter wall that residents had once criticized as excessive, emerged virtually unscathed. The wall's builder, former mayor Kotaku Wamura, had been ridiculed for decades as paranoid and wasteful. March 11th, he became a posthumous hero. The reckoning and rebirth, the 2011 tsunami, forced Japan to confront an uncomfortable truth. Their war against nature was, and one it had barely begun. The disaster killed nearly 20,000 people and caused damage exceeding $200 billion, making it one of the costliest natural disasters in human history. The walls that were supposed to provide absolute protection had provided only partial defense. But Japan didn't surrender. Instead, they doubled down with a determination that bordered on obsession. Post-2011 reconstruction included building even higher walls, some reaching heights of 23 meters tall, enough to hide 7-story buildings. Entire coastal communities were relocated to higher ground behind these new super barriers. The total investment in tsunami defenses now exceeds $300 billion. It's making it more expensive than sending humans to Mars. A legacy written in concrete, encouraged today. Japan's 395-kilometer tsunami defense system stands as humanity, its most ambitious attempt to defeat nature through sheer determination and engineering prowess. It represents more than just coastal protection, it's a monument to human refusal to accept defeat, even against impossible odds. Critics argue that these walls create a false sense of security, encouraging development in dangerous areas while destroying coastal ecosystems and traditional fishing communities. They point out that no wall can stop every tsunami, and that Japan's billions might have been better spent on evacuation systems and elevated communities. Yet supporters see something grander: proof that humanity need not be nature's victim. They argue that while the walls may not stop every wave, they buy the precious time needed for people to escape, transforming certain death into survivable disaster. As climate change intensifies, storms and rising seas threaten coastlines worldwide, Japan's tsunami walls offer both inspiration and warning. They demonstrate the incredible power of human engineering and determination, simultaneously revealing the humbling limits of both. In the end, Japan's 395-kilometer fortress against the sea stands not just as protection, but as humanity's most concrete statement of defiance against a planet that sometimes seems determined to kill us all. Ocean remembers every insult, every wall, every act of human defiance. But so do the Japanese people, who continue to build, to hope, and to dare the waves to try again. Their massive walls may not guarantee victory, but they ensure that if humanity falls to the sea, it will not fall without the greatest fight in history.